the first question really was how are decisions made when selecting players, and why was more not spent in the summer? And Tom Wagner was saying that basically we spent as much as we could, and he talked about Dr. Doom,
Dr. Doom, yeah.
one of the financial directors. I
Yeah.
presume you need a Dr. Doom because you need someone to say actually you're going to overstep the mark here.
Well, Dr. Doom stops you getting points deductions.
Yeah. Welcome back to BCFC Royal Blue. Now, yesterday we put out a podcast which looked at the open house that took place on Wednesday, the 22nd of October, but that specifically related to the fantastic and exciting things that are going on with the sports quarter and the new stadium. But there was so much discussed at the open house that we just couldn't get it all in one podcast. So in this podcast, we're going to pick up the other part of the open house, which is the other things that were discussed around the club in addition to what was previously spoken about in the sports quarter. So, Matt, I mean, obviously the open house was fantastic to watch. It's always good to give us an insight into the club. But I think you're going to start off with what Jeremy Dale was saying.
Yeah, I'm glad we broke it down into two podcasts because we just couldn't cover everything in one, could we? And, in this one, we're going to cover a bit more about Jeremy Dale, Tom Wagner's questions at the end. And obviously the first video is more about the sports quarter and the future and the excitement around the plans and the build and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, the first point for me, Dad, from Jeremy Dale talking was the fact that we have to turn ourselves into an iconic brand. I think we're already starting to see that, aren't we? With the sponsorship with Undefeated over the years, with the merchandise in the shop now being just such good quality. Me and you are guilty of it now and fortunate enough to be able to do this, but we spend, a decent amount of money in the shop these days. We get the kits for the podcast now. I'm looking for a little hat around Christmas time, hopefully, and stuff like that. So, the fact that merchandise has got so good, I think the steps they've put in with the sponsorships, with the deals, with the kits, with the merchandise, everything around the shop, I think we are starting to become that iconic brand. And as I said, it's bigger than just what you sell in the shop. But I think what Tom Wagner does behind the scenes with his deals and the partnerships that he's making, I think we're on our path to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that everything that Jeremy Dale said, and anybody who's watching this podcast from another club, Jeremy Dale is our CEO. If you don't know who he is, and there's always a positivity about the open house, but tends to be. The focus, as we've already done, is always on the stadium from the fans and all this. But so much other stuff going on that excites me for the future. So, for example, you mentioned some of the things that he spoke about. He talked about us being a top-tier club, and that's men's and women's, which is obviously linked to the development of the stadium and the sports quarter. And he talked about revenues as well. Do you see what he said about revenues, about the way that they've increased significantly since Knighthead took over? I think it was 5 times or something like that.
To be honest, Dad, we knew this because even the season we got relegated, weren't we fourth? Only one behind the parachute payment clubs that year as well. So we're clearly making now with Delta and Undefeated and all the partnerships that we have. Renaming the stadium, all these different things. The revenue is now going through the roof, and also as well, we've sold players for decent money. A lot of people forget that when they think about Blues. Over the years now, since Knighthead came in, think about Jordan James, Miyoshi, and Pritchard, and all these.
Money we got
players.
for Job as well.
Job and Jude. Selling on from that, so we have made decent money in the market from players that we've sold. But for me, that's all good. But it's impressive when we do see, the partnerships and the sponsorships coming, isn't it? It just shows that business acumen that Knighthead have to pull in as much money as they possibly. And ultimately, some Blues fans, aren't massive fans of renaming it to St.Andrews Knighthead Park and some of the deals. But if we don't do these deals, it ultimately doesn't lead to a better product on the pitch. So we need to make those revenue deals because football's a different game now. It's all about the money you bring in. Look at the likes of Liverpool and Tottenham up there as well. They do such a good job of putting the team on the map in terms of the way they sell things, the way they make money. And I know they have the Premier League advantage, the history advantage. I totally get that. But actually, you can make a lot of smart decisions where you bring in a low ton of revenue.
Yeah, you mentioned as well about the revenues needed for an improvement of on the pitch, but that does take time, and I think that's where a lot of fans' frustrations are at the moment. Not frustrations, we obviously with the momentum that's going on off the pitch, we'd like that to be matched by on the pitch. But
of course,
as we've seen over history, shows us that you can't just come in, put a lot of money into a club, and then suddenly everything just turns out. Very rarely is that the case. It takes time. And we're seeing that now. We're on that journey, but obviously, as fans, we're impatient. We want it now on the pitch. I'm talking about because to us, that's what all really matters. Everything else is fantastic, and it helps towards that. He talked about as well the increase in food and beverage, and fair play to the club what they've done because that stadium now is completely different before they came. You know, the atmosphere around the stadium, the food outlets, the fan zones. It's a completely different offering. I think people want to go there early now to spend their money and create that atmosphere. So I'm not surprised when he was talking about food and beverage, merchandise, hospitality, you know, all that type of things, all feeding towards more revenue for the club.
Again, Dad, I do not take it for granted that we're in a position where we can go to a game and have a couple of beers and enjoy a little bit of food and stuff. But I'm at a point in my, I mean, you raised me and you and Mum raised me to enjoy a good bargain and find the lowest price and all these things. But actually, the older I get, and again, I know I'm fortunate enough to do this. You know, I don't mind paying a bit more for good quality.
Yeah.
Whether that's food, whether that's clothes, whether that's beer. And, you know, the club now, Dad, when you think about the, chicken burgers we had a couple of weeks ago and the neck oil and the beers that we actually have good quality stuff down St.Andrews.
Well, you mentioned in the intro about, wanting to get a hat for Christmas and stuff like that. So if anybody from the Blues Club Shop's watching, when you get your little elf hats in, let me know so I can go and buy one from that, please. A little green one would be nice. But it is good quality, in fairness. You know, it is completely different, isn't it? You know, it's you don't mind because it's obviously football merchandise, but it's also all the leisure wear they do and, you know, the hoodies.
It's really good quality.
Fantastic. And all the kids' stuff as well, you know.
Yeah.
So you can end up spending a fortune.
Jeremy, you do have to be careful going into that club shop now. You know, you could walk in there and come out with a £200 bill.
I'm sure people
it's
do.
very easily
if
done.
you've got a family of like a number of kids as well, I mean, it adds up quickly, doesn't it?
It does.
It also talked about social media, and obviously we know the importance the club put on social media for all sorts of different things, for impressions, for profile, for revenue as well. He talked about us moving from 35th now to 15th in the amount of impressions we get in social media compared to other football clubs, and that's above 6 Premier League teams at the moment. And you can see that on social media as well, can't you? You can see the massive range of increased. They've obviously got the new Blues weekly magazine, Blues Rising as well, which is a thing, and there's a lot more the club are doing now for social media.
What I've noticed that is the club's a lot more reactive. You know, if something's going on or a trend's happening or something's happening in the football world, Blues respond to it a lot quicker than we used to do. I mean, our social media used to be a graveyard shift. You know, nothing went out, and it was, you know, always really, again, pre-Nighthead here, it was just really depressing, and there was nothing really to celebrate. Whereas now, I love the media team. I think they do a great job of striking that balance of, you know, historical elements to Blues and the passion and the support of the club, but also making it quite funny and quirky. And,
they do a great job.
They do a great job.
Jeremy Dale also, which I was really, very impressed with, he talked about us becoming a commercial powerhouse. And he said, we're not there yet, but we're working very much towards that. And, of course, that's all linked to the Sports Quarter and what that is as well. There was some talk about the fantastic work that the Birmingham Foundation doing the community.
I love this, by the way.
It's. I don't think for fans, you know, outside of the people who work in the foundation, know an awful lot about that. So it's good to see some publicity about all the hard work that's going on in the community, the engagement with schools, and and that's only going to increase with the Sports Quarter as well, because that's a big part of that.
But Dad, how wonderful is that to be a part of a club that puts the community first as well? You know, I've seen many clips of Tom Wagner. Even Tom Brady went one time to a school in Birmingham and was giving out some hoodies and some merchandise. I've seen Ethan Laird in schools and stuff. You know, it's great to see that Blues are putting their focus not just on the football but the community. Because, you know, being a footballer is a hugely privileged position. You know, you get to do for a living what most people only dream of, and you get paid very, very well to do so. So the fact that you then want to give back to the community, and, you know, I remember being that age, Dad, your football stars are your heroes. Yeah. You know, and the fact that they are putting such a focus on the community, to me, being a Birmingham City supporter, that fills me with pride. Yeah, no, it's good, and you know, to everybody that works for the foundation, all the brilliant work that people do, you know, full respect, and you know, keep on doing that, because it's absolutely fabulous. One thing I found of interest, he referred to the Mansfield game. And Tom Wagner FaceTiming Tom Brady, and obviously, you know, he couldn't believe what he was seeing, and that was such a magnificent moment. You know, it's a moment I'll always remember for the rest of my life in terms of that atmosphere, the scarves, the singing. It was absolutely brilliant. It was a day of celebration. I think we really made the most of it. He also talked about, very importantly as well, obviously the need to grow the fan base around the world, and you can see what the club are doing in terms of trying to do that through social media. But also, you know, the need for us to, obviously, this stadium is going to have 62,000 seats in it. Yeah. So we need to continue to do things to attract
new fans, and I think he asked us to play our part in that as well as fans to get the message out there, which we do. What I love as well on social media as well, I love people when they go on holiday and you see their Birmingham City towels in, I don't know, Mexico or Mallorca, wherever it is. That's absolutely fabulous.
What's great though, you'd be surprised how many Blues supporters are in and around the world. The amount of times I've been to Spain over the years here, and someone flags a towel or you see a tattoo on someone's leg, or I don't know, whatever starts that conversation, you'd be surprised how many Blues fans there are.
Well, we have a lot that watch our channel, Matt, and a lot of expats who are living in other countries now are obviously very complimentary about our channel because it allows that they tell us it allows them to still connect with the club, and we appreciate that. And if that's all we ever do on this channel, it's worth doing, isn't it?
100%, absolutely, that's what it's about.
So that's brilliant. Jeremy Dale, just to finish a few points on Jeremy Dale, he talked about 12,000 fans on the season ticket waiting list, and he encouraged everybody, if they have a ticket and can't go to the game, season ticket holders, to use a ticket exchange to give everybody opportunity to go. And then, which has been a little bit sort of contradictory compared to our post-match Bristol City podcast. He talked about the data-driven approach to the club. We gave that a bit of a hammering, didn't we? In that, well, I don't say hammering. I think there's a reality that we felt. If you watched that podcast against Bristol City, we just felt that our players are too, at the moment, they're too robotic, and that's.
Well, you described it nicely, like plugging an iPad into a player and then they're almost downloading and they go on the pitch.
And, I'm not saying there's not a place for data and stuff like that. Not to the detriment. But anyway, that's a different story. We've done that already. Go and have a watch of the Bristol City post-match podcast if you want to see our opinions on that.
When he said that though, Dad, and I think I've referenced this in podcast like a year or so ago, but it really reminded me of Moneyball, the film. It's a film with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, and it's an American baseball team.
Yeah.
And you've got the Yankees, who are like the Man United, let's just say, or the Liverpool of the baseball world, and they're spending all this money. And Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill come into this team, and they have a strategy to buy players based on data. Yeah. And they actually do very well. It's a success story film. It's really interesting. But when he said this, it reminded me of that. But however, football has a human element to it, doesn't it? You can read all the stats and the data you want. It doesn't take into account, passion, pride, and the grit and determination of players sometimes, and sometimes you can overanalyze the data, and people become robust. I think that's what we were getting at in the Bristol City video. Yeah. But anyway, we move on. But it's still interesting to hear, and I think that if you don't start using AI and data, you're going to get left behind anyway.
You will, and I think there is a place for it, but I think you have to be very cautious with
it.
Also, Tom Wagner as well. Now, Tom Wagner had quite a lot to say, but a lot of it was in relation to the sports quarter and the new stadium. So we've obviously looked at that on the previous podcast. So have a look at that. But he did also talk about him being very comfortable with what he's seen so far, and this is just prior to the Bristol City game. This was, but so obviously we did lose that one. But he said he was comfortable with what he's seen so far, and he likes what he's seeing. And he talked about the data. We're one of the biggest data-driven analysis clubs in Europe now, and he's excited and confident and comfortable about the future. So I think basically he's given his backing to Chris Davies there.
Yes.
And
that's twice now in as many weeks, isn't it? That he's publicly came out and said he has the full support of the board. So.
Yeah.
By the way, I like that.
Yeah. No.
I think if a manager's in position and you've got the board there and you've got the owner, I think he should be backed. And obviously, you got to remember that he's never going to come out in front of the cameras and say anything negative. No. He's not that kind of person. That's not the way he wants to run his business. But me and you have said this openly, Dan, and I think it's worth saying it, especially after the Bristol City video. We stand by Chris Davies. We think he's the man to get us through this, and I still am glad that Tom Wagner's backing him personally. Everyone's entitled to an opinion on that.
And everything else that Tom Wagner said really related to the stadium. So we're going to move on, because what I want to do is I want to pick up some of the questions that were asked, because some really interesting responses to some of these questions. So these from either people who had actually posted on the forum or were in the room. And the first question really was how are decisions made when selecting players, and why was more not spent in the summer? And Tom Wagner was saying that basically we spent as much as we could, and he talked about Dr. Doom.
Dr. Doom,
one of the financial directors. I presume you need a Dr. Doom because you need someone to say, actually, you're going to overstep the mark here.
Well, Dr. Doom stops you getting points deductions.
Yeah, and he's talking about when what appears to be a free transfer is never a free transfer, which I think most people do understand that.
Yeah, wages, signing on fees, agent fees, all adds up.
But he did say about obviously more revenue will allow us in the future to get better players.
You know what, Dad? I'd rather hear an honest answer to a question than someone who fluffs it up and lies.
Yeah, and I think we all felt that, didn't we, Matt? We all felt that we know that we, like all clubs, we have to work within the boundaries of the financial rules. So therefore, there has to be a line where you can't go over. But the more revenue you generate, the more better. But obviously, the revenue, I believe, takes a while to filter through. So
It does,
we
yeah.
won't reap the benefits of the revenue maybe until next year,
Yeah.
when it all sort of comes into whatever that accounts are. But just remember, Blues fans, I know that a lot of you will, at the time of recording, will be not overly happy with the club's position in the Championship table. Neither are we. But it does take time. Building a team takes time. We need to realise that where we've come from, and that it's going to take a number of transfer windows to really get the squad that we want, I believe, and we're not nowhere near there at the moment.
No.
And then Craig Gardner explained as well the way they select players, that they through their data, they collect the best data for the five top targets in every single position. But clearly, sometimes he used the example of Virgil van Dijk. He'll pop, obviously he's out of reach, but then you can go down and see who they are. So they put all the attributes of what they want in the data, and that's the way they select them. But what was very interesting, ultimately, Chris Davies has the final say. So when they've identified,
that's good, Dave, because there's been a lot of chatter on social media recently about, is this even Chris Davies' team?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear the process, because clearly a list is made, but he does get the final say. Because there's been some comments about him, not necessarily buying the players on that list, not supporting that team, in terms of he hasn't got the final say. But actually, it's good to hear that he does have that final say.
Well, he said himself that there's about 30 players came in since he's been there. So if that's not his team, I don't know what is.
Exactly. Yeah.
They also talked about Chris Davies talked very much looking at the character of players as well. I think character's a hard thing to judge, but I think they've got that wrong in some cases. By the way,
do you think?
Yeah. Tom Wagner did finish that question by saying he's very, very. He said we're very lucky to have Chris Davies and Craig, and he says they're doing an excellent job. And then somebody asked the question to Tom Wagner: is it realistic to be challenging at the top of the table? And is it based upon the start to the season? Do you want to revise your expectations? And he answered in two parts. He goes, "Well, yes." I do think it's realistic, and no, I don't want to revise my expectations. He's the owner; he's entitled to do that.
He said at the time of recording, obviously a game has passed since then, but he mentioned that we're only 3 points off the playoffs, didn't he?
Yeah.
And obviously, the Championship is such a volatile league. A couple of wins, you can be right up there. A couple of losses, you're right down there, aren't you? So I think it was good for him to be assertive, though, on that answer and be adamant. Again, your owner is never going to be less than the fully optimistic man in the room. So, again, I'd rather hear optimism than pessimism. I mean, I guess the middle ground to that is realism, and I think he is a realist. But, it's still early, 12 games in.
Yeah, it is, and we've obviously got a lot of football to play this season.
Exactly.
I think Blues fans will be more than happy if they see some progress in the league position, in the performances. That's what we want. But again, that's for another podcast. Another question.
Portsmouth pre-match coming tomorrow.
Yes,
more of that topic there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Another question that was asked, Master, is there a pathway for young players to get into the first team? This was directed at Mike Rigg, the academy director. I noticed as well when I looked at what he said, he didn't actually answer yes. It was a good answer what he said. He went into the investment over the last couple of years into the academy, the fact now that we are a Category 1 academy, and he talked a lot about that. We're now competing with the biggest clubs, and he said getting players into the first team is actually a long road, and he talked about that journey from very, very young children effectively all the way through and progressing, but it's but he did say his job and his team's job is to raise the bar and to actually provide that pathway where you can get young players eventually get them into the first team. But of course, players are assets as well, so it might be developing players that might never make the first team, but they still become good players that we could make money out of. I suspect. Didn't actually say that, but I was reading between the lines saying that as well. There's a question about ticket prices as well, and that had already been answered previously. This is sort of a repeat question, really, where Jeremy Dale was saying that the aspiration is that they don't raise ticket prices to ridiculous levels and don't use that as the main driver for revenue, but there will be inflationary prices, and of course there'll also be all the other packages, hospitality and all that type of thing. So that was good to hear.
Yeah.
A really interesting question, which is the question, by the way, if I was invited and I was there, this is the question I would have asked. Okay, so I would have asked Tom Wagner, when do you plan to complete the full purchase of the club, and what influence do the previous owners have on running the club? So on the second part of that question, he talked about, well, they're never here, they're never invited to these events, so obviously they've got no influence at all. And his answer was short and sweet about when it will happen. He said soon. So there's no actual defined deadline on that, but I think
it's complicated though, isn't it? A lot goes on behind the scenes when you're purchasing a football club.
It
so
is.
He can't give you an exact day or month.
It is. But then the counter argument to that, we're 2 years in now from when they took over the club. So that complication. Now we've got to be getting to that place now where
It's legalities around the Hong Kong Stock Exchange.
yeah,
I
I'm
believe,
sure
but
it's all tied up and buttoned up,
yeah.
but yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, there was again. This is related to the stadium, but a question that won't surprise anybody. They asked Tom any thoughts on the name of the new stadium, and he's basically said it will go to the highest bidder,
yeah.
which is hardly a surprise. There was a really important question by somebody asked about car stripping as well. What's the club doing about that? And Jeremy Dale said, well, from the Millwall game, there will be additional police on the streets in areas where it usually happens. So I think the club have been in contact with the West
Bolton
Midlands
Road,
Police.
Garrison Lane. It's all.
Yeah,
it's all
I think
those-
there's various hotspots
yeah, there
around
is, yeah.
there, and I think they're obviously just more of a police presence in those
That's
areas.
welcomed.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, we're very fortunate it's never happened to us, though, but I can't imagine anything worse than coming back and looking at your car.
We've
in that
actually
state,
walked
so-
past
we
cars
have,
where
yeah.
it's happened, and it's
Horrible.
so sad and and awful and completely unacceptable. And another question, Matt, as well, which I think was a very bold question, which says, "What is Knighthead's end game, and how will you ensure the return on investment for your shareholders?"
Another good question, that is, isn't it?
Tom Wagner talked about the Knighthead or the club being owned by an insurance company. So it says it's not like an equity or hedge fund. He said, which a lot of people think it is. You know, Knighthead are a hedge fund, but the club is owned by the insurance company part of their organisation, and he basically said we're going to keep spending money and we're not going anywhere.
There you go.
So I think that they will have an end game. I mean, regardless of that answer, you know for a fact that Tom Wagner is going to have an end game. But
he is.
but with the money he's investing, not just in our club but in Birmingham, he's already bought other clubs, netball, hasn't he, cricket, and obviously all the land that they've purchased around the Wheels site. It's not something you can just walk away from.
Exactly.
I don't think so. There is an end game, but it's a long term thing. I think he was suggesting as well. Somebody asked the question. There's only a couple more here, Matt, as well. Somebody said, "Would you consider setting up another store, a Blues store, in other locations like the city centre?" And Jeremy Dale said yes. He said, but he actually said that somebody referred to the Villa store in the Bullring, I think, and he said that'll be losing money. So obviously, it costs a lot of money to have a store in a prime location like that. But he did say they were looking at other locations and options too. But he said they'll do it in a financially viable way. So there's no point in just planting them. They're not going to do it unless they're going to make money, are they?
Makes sense.
So and obviously the club shop that they've done now at the Blues is 4 times bigger than it originally was, and it's got some good stuff in it. And the final thing that was about the Phil Neumann, Christopher Clara fight, or a non-fight as it was. And somebody says, are the social media rumours true? And Chris Davies says, no, they get on really, really well. And he talked about, well, if there was a fight, he said,
love to see it.
He said he'd love to see it. And he said Phil Neumann on his backside or something like that. If it was Chris Clara. It was all tongue-in-cheek. Yeah. And
if we're going to go to that secondary school, who's the toughest on the playground? I think Christoph Clara comes out of that in the Blues team, head and shoulders above everyone else. He's a unit. He's an absolute. I mean, Phil Norman's not a small guy by any means, but Clara just. I said when we signed him, he's the kind of bloke that you walk across the street if he's walking towards you, kind of thing, Clara.
Yeah, well, you said you actually said when we signed him, he's the type of bloke you look at him, he'll kill you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But in all fairness, and again, just to finish, I think we need more players like him. We need more players with a presence like that. It's more intimidating
in the
players.
midfield, I think. But yeah, no, you're right. Yeah,
up front as well.
Yeah,
we need people. We don't just have one. We have it through the team, and a few more bigger sort of physically players that can actually sort of look after themselves. But so that's it really. Any final points, Matt?
No, just obviously I'm glad we've split these down into two. It's good to talk about everything that we covered in the open house, and as you said, I think it's safe to say, we love this club, Dad. We talk very openly and honestly about the stuff that happens on the pitch. We're not quite there yet, but everything off the pitch, you have to just, I think you said it yesterday, almost pinch yourself really with everything's happening. It's a wonderful time to be a Birmingham City supporter. The on-pitch stuff will come good.
Yeah.
I have no doubt even this season we're going to get in better and we're just going to improve as time goes on. I think patience is required, but overall, Dad, fantastic to hear from the big guys at the top of this club, and onwards and upwards we move.
Yeah, and I'm sure all Blues fans would agree with that sentiment that off the pitch it really, really is exciting times, and regardless of the doubters, and we know they're all out there, about our club. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they think. Doesn't matter what they say. We know that our owners are very serious about taking our football club forward and also developing the sports quarter. And it really is exciting times for Blues fans. But as always, we'd love to know your thoughts and Add your comments below, as you always do. Let us know anything really about what we've spoken about, or any opinions that you've got, just generally about the club. Always happy for me and Matt to hear what you got to say and respond to them. If you did like this podcast, as always, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to our social media channels already, then pop along to our X page and our Instagram page. And if you'd like to watch or listen to your podcast on Spotify, you'll also find us on there, and you'll see the handles appearing on the screen for all these channels right now. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and you'd like to, hit that big red subscribe button so you don't miss any future podcasts that we put out. And if you want to be notified every time we do put a podcast out, there's a little bell icon next to the subscribe button. So just give that a press and you'll get your notifications. So that's it for this one. Myself and Matt will see you on the next one. All about Birmingham City.